Aquí tienes el resumen esencial sobre la crisis de libertad de expresión y derechos digitales en Uruguay. Resulta que estamos analizando unos informes que revelan cómo las autoridades uruguayas están llevando a ciudadanos a la Fiscalía por unos simples tuits, desatando una tormenta política sobre la opinión en Internet que, la verdad, te va a dejar de piedra. Primero, imagínate que ciudadanos de a pie están declarando ante la mismísima unidad de ciberdelitos. Fíjate en Antonio Romero Píriz, un profe jubilado de 74 años al que citaron este febrero de 2026, literalmente por un tuit antiguo criticando a la dictadura cubana. Y ojo, que también investigan a otros tuiteros por compartir memes bastante vulgares contra Leandro Grille, un periodista afín al gobierno. Segundo, pues claro, todo esto ha desatado una guerra de narrativas brutal. Por un lado, la oposición acusa al nuevo gobierno de izquierdas, liderado por Yamandú Orsi, de tener una deriva autoritaria para callar a los disidentes. Pero a ver, los defensores del gobierno aseguran que esto no es censura, sino que es simplemente aplicar la ley de toda la vida para frenar campañas de acoso y difamación. Finalmente, nos encontramos con una paradoja tecnológica tremenda, porque mientras el Estado gasta sus recursos persiguiendo tuiteros, resulta que sufre una crisis espectacular con hackeos masivos de identidades.
Imagine waking up tomorrow morning.
Okay.
The sun is just coming through the blinds, you reach over to the nightstand to grab your phone, and you expect to see the usual notifications.
Yeah, a couple of emails, maybe a text from a friend.
Exactly. A news alert, a calendar reminder. But instead, sitting right there on your lock screen is an official digital summons from the National Police Force.
Wow. That'll wake you up.
Your heart rate instantly spikes. You haven't stolen a car.
Right.
You haven't committed fraud. You haven't been in a bar fight. But you scroll down through the formal legal jargon, and you realize you are being ordered to present yourself to a cybercrime unit for questioning.
And the reason is the crazy part.
Because of a meme you reposted 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Or maybe a frustrated political opinion you fired off late at night.
Exactly. The state apparatus has logged it, categorized it, and is now officially pulling you into the justice system.
It feels entirely surreal.
It feels like a rejected draft of a cyberpunk novel.
Right, but we are not talking about fiction today.
No, we are not. We are talking about reality playing out right now in a nation that has historically been considered the absolute gold standard for institutional stability in Latin America.
A progressive democracy.
Welcome to this deep dive. Our focus today is Uruguay.
And it is a profound structural crisis we're looking at.
It really is.
As we sit here looking at the data from early 2026, Uruguay is at the epicenter of what I would call an epistemological and legal earthquake regarding digital sovereignty.
An earthquake is a good way to put it.
We are watching a real-time collision between an incredibly powerful state surveillance apparatus, the unchecked influence of corporate tech monopolies, and the fundamental constitutional right of a citizen to speak their mind.
And the reason we are doing this specific deep dive right now, the reason we pushed this to the front of the schedule is because we have an absolute mountain of fresh sources that we need to get through.
Mountains of data.
Our mission today is to focus heavily on these latest updates. We have leaked prosecutorial documents, we have direct system screenshots, and comprehensive PDF reports.
Updated as recently as March 6, 2026.
Exactly. This is a highly fluid, rapidly evolving situation. The rules of the digital ecosystem are being rewritten while we watch.
Yeah, in real time.
I've brought you all these hyper-local updates from Montevideo, and I know you've been analyzing how these specific legal battles actually serve as a massive warning sign.
For the broader global digital landscape.
Right. The landscape that you and I and everyone listening live in every single day.
That is exactly the value of looking at this specific geography. The frictions we are observing in Uruguay right now, the paradoxes in their legal code, the intense political polarization over speech, they're functioning as a global laboratory.
A testing ground.
Yes. The precedents being set in these March 2026 documents are giving us a preview of the exact battles every single digital citizen is going to face, regardless of what country they live in.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really need to trace how this escalated so quickly.
Because it didn't happen overnight.
Right, you don't just wake up one day to a society where citizens are getting police papers for tweets. There is a very specific sequence of events that brought us to these March 2026 updates.
If we look back just a few months to late 2025, we find the initial flashpoint.
A catalyst.
Yeah. There's a journalist for the newspaper El País named Sebastián Cabrera.
Okay.
He published a public interest article doing exactly what an investigative reporter is supposed to do. But shortly after publication, he was summoned to a police station.
A police station.
And not just once, but twice, over a defamation complaint related to his reporting.
The distinction of who is doing the summoning is the crucial detail there, right?
Absolutely. In a functional democratic framework, a journalist might occasionally have to answer a civil complaint.
Sure, or face a judge in a formal courtroom setting.
But when an active police department summons a journalist to an interrogation room to give a quote-unquote voluntary statement regarding their published work,
it introduces an immediate, undeniable layer of physical state intimidation.
Exactly. And the reaction from civil society was instantaneous.
I imagine.
You had organizations like APU, the Press Association, and KINFO essentially throwing up red flares.
They saw the writing on the wall.
They correctly identified that allowing local police to independently haul in reporters over defamation claims would instantly freeze investigative journalism across the country.
And what's interesting is that the institutional pushback actually worked. The government realized they had a PR and a constitutional nightmare on their hands.
So they issued a vital update in February 2026.
Right. The Ministry of the Interior released a formal directive explicitly ordering the police to stop taking these voluntary statements in cases involving journalists.
If a politician or a public figure felt insulted or defamed by a reporter, the police were ordered to bypass the precinct entirely
and refer the complaint straight to the Fiscalia of the prosecutor's office.
It was a structural safeguard to get the police out of the newsroom.
It was a necessary firewall.
Yeah.
But this is exactly where the narrative takes a sharp turn into the crisis we are looking at today. Because while the professional, credentialed journalists received that institutional shield, the underlying legal mechanism of criminal defamation didn't go away.
No, the state simply redirected it.
The heat shifted.
Yeah.
The latest documents show that the ordinary citizen, the everyday person listening to this right now, scrolling through their timeline, is now the one absorbing the impact.
Without the backing of a national press association.
Exactly. Individual social media users are now receiving direct, formal summonses from the Fiscalia for their online comments.
The battlefield expanded from the professional press to the entire digital public square.
And the most prominent manifestation of this shift, the case that has completely polarized the country in these early months of 2026, revolves around a figure named Leandro Grill.
Let's really look at the Grill case because it perfectly encapsulates how messy and vitriolic this has become.
For those who aren't familiar with the Uruguayan media landscape, Leandro Grill is a highly visible, left-leaning journalist and commentator.
He's a prominent voice at Carsi Creatus.
And he hosts Legitimate Defensa. He is not someone who shies away from a fight.
No, he frequently targets right-wing figures. He is deeply vocal about international conflicts, and he has a massive, highly engaged audience online.
He is a very intentional provocateur in the political space, which is entirely his right.
And it is worth noting that he is intimately familiar with the legal boundaries of speech.
Right. Back in 2021, a right-wing deputy actually filed a criminal complaint against Grill for defamation.
Over comments Grill made regarding the COVID-19 vaccine.
But in that instance, the prosecutor ultimately requested the case be dismissed, and a judge absolved him.
So he has previously relied on the legal system to vindicate his right to speak aggressively about public figures.
But right now, when the updates rolling in through February and March 2026, the entire dynamic is inverted.
The Fiscalia General de la Nación, specifically the sixth turn in Montevideo, is actively issuing citations to individual users for posts that target Grill.
And we have to be very clear about what these posts actually are. We aren't talking about a 500-word essay critiquing his stance on the Venezuelan economy.
No. We are talking about a coordinated barrage of highly vulgar troll memes.
The primary catalyst is a specific phrase. Goyo Alvarez se cogió a la mama de Leandro Grille.
For context, Gregorio Goyo Alvarez was a brutal military dictator in Uruguay.
So this is not a generic internet insult.
It is a highly calculated, deeply personal, deeply historical weaponization of trauma.
Aimed directly at a public figure's mother, using the name of a dictator.
And it didn't just stay as a single stray comment, it became a banner.
The sources show that users were adopting this phrase as their actual display names. They were generating image macros and systematically flooding his mentions.
It was a digital swarm.
And the state decided to intervene. We have documentation of an account with the handle at Felipeville 26158, an account that literally used that phrase as its display name being served with an official police document.
On February 20th, they posted a photo of a citation ordering them to appear at the Fiscalia.
A few days later, another right-wing commentator at Pico posts a photo of his own citation.
The state actively started hunting down the nodes of this digital swarm.
Which brings us to a deeply fractured national debate.
If you look at the societal reaction to these citations, the country has split into two completely irreconcilable camps.
And it is incredibly important that we look at the arguments of both sides here with absolute neutrality for everyone listening, because both perspectives strike at the core of what a digital society is supposed to be.
Let's start with the defenders of these legal actions. If I am looking at this from their perspective, I am looking at a coordinated campaign of psychological harassment.
Right. If a mob of anonymous avatars decides to relentlessly spam the timeline of a public figure with graphic, vulgar insults about their mother and a historical dictator, that ceases to be political discourse.
The defenders are arguing that this is textbook targeted harassment.
Exactly. The defenders maintain that the state has a moral and legal obligation to protect citizens from what they classify as discurso de odio, hate speech.
They argue that freedom of expression is not an absolute right to run a malicious, coordinated campaign designed to degrade and terrorize an individual and their family.
From their viewpoint, the state is simply executing routine, established legal mechanisms to maintain a baseline of civilized public discourse.
They reject the idea that holding serial defamers accountable is somehow authoritarian.
And they bring up a very strong point regarding institutional continuity, don't they?
They do. The defenders are incredibly quick to point out the hypocrisy of the critics.
Because they note that the exact same defamation statutes, utilizing the exact same legal citations, were heavily utilized under the previous right-wing administration of Luis Lacalle.
They argue that the legal architecture hasn't changed.
The only thing that has changed is the political affiliation of the people complaining.
To the defenders, applying the law equally to internet trolls is the definition of a functioning justice system.
But if we pivot and look at the critics' perspective, the narrative is vastly different.
And historically terrifying for the people living there.
The critics look at the ruling Frente Amplio government, which won the 2024 election under Yamandú Orsi, and they see what they call a subtle authoritarian drift.
They view this as a systematic campaign of political persecution disguised as civility laws.
The critics point to the ideological alignments of the ruling coalition and claim the government is importing Cuba-style repression to silence digital dissent.
You see terms like Falcon Verde being heavily circulated online.
The Green Falcon. For anyone unfamiliar with South American history, that is not a casual metaphor.
No, the green Ford Falcon was the vehicle notoriously used by death squads and military dictatorships during the 1970s and 80s to abduct and disappear political dissidents.
By invoking that imagery, the critics are equating a digital summons over a meme to the prelude of actual state terror.
They are arguing that when the state apparatus, the police, the cybercrime units, the prosecutors can be mobilized to seize devices and interrogate citizens over a crude joke, the line between protecting a citizen and repressing a populace has been crossed.
They argue that a meme, no matter how vulgar or offensive, is fundamentally an expression of political contempt.
And criminalizing contempt is the first step toward criminalizing opposition.
It puts you, the listener, in a fascinating philosophical bind. Where do you draw the line?
On one hand, you have the undeniable psychological violence of a coordinated hate mob.
On the other, you have the profound chilling effect of state police knocking on doors over internet posts.
How does a democracy balance the right to be free from harassment with the right to mock the powerful?
And that balance completely shatters when we look at the most detailed and, frankly, the most alarming update from our March 6th, 2026 document stack.
The Leandro Grill case involves highly vulgar personal attacks. But the case of Antonio Romero Perez is entirely different.
And it shows how wide this dragnet has truly become.
The Perez file. This is the case that bridges the digital ether and physical reality.
Let's introduce him. Antonio Romero Perez is 74 years old.
He is a retired professor, a graduate of the local Teachers Institute.
But his political history is what makes this so complex. He is not a young internet troll.
No, he is a man who was literally a co-founder of the base committees for the Frente Amplio back in 1971.
He was a political prisoner. He was exiled during the military dictatorship.
He has lived through actual physical state repression.
He is a man whose entire identity is forged in opposition to dictatorship. He left the Frente Amplio in 1980, eventually writing a book called Los Hombres, Grises the Gray Men, detailing his ideological split.
Today, he operates under the handle at Romero Perez. He calls himself an Oriental Republicano.
And his activism isn't just digital. He spends his time physically walking neighborhoods, handing out printed flyers, engaging in classic analog political campaigning.
And this 74-year-old retired professor, a man with a deep history of anti-dictatorship activism, gets pulled into the cybercrime unit.
And it wasn't for a targeted harassment campaign.
It wasn't for a vulgar meme about someone's family.
It was over a single tweet.
A single, isolated post published sometime in 2025.
In this post, he levied a criticism against the foreign government. He referred to the Cuban regime as the tirania castrista, the Castro tyranny.
Let me stop you there, because the mechanics of this are vital. He tweets a political opinion about Cuba. The Uruguayan state didn't spontaneously decide to investigate him for that.
Right. Who initiated the legal action?
Militants belonging to the Communist Party of Uruguay, the PCU, saw the post.
They took offense to his characterization of the Cuban government.
And they utilized the state apparatus by filing a formal denunciation against him for defamation or injury before the specialized cybercrime unit.
They leveraged domestic cybercrime laws to penalize a criticism of a foreign state.
And the state actually acted on it.
On February 18th, 2026, he is issued a citation. He is ordered to appear at the cybercrime section of the police, not the prosecutor's office, the police.
And when he gets there, according to his own public statements, they start interrogating him about the underlying motivations of his publications.
They are questioning a 74-year-old man about why he dislikes the Frente Amplio and why he criticizes Cuba.
Which is the exact definition of an ideological interrogation.
It moves entirely past the realm of adjudicating a specific defamation claim and enters the territory of policing political thought.
What's fascinating here is the phenomenon of the invisible tweet.
Yes, this is the most fascinating strategic element of the whole file.
So this case goes massively viral.
An account called @DirectDiario UI picks it up on February 23rd, plastering the word gravissimo across their network.
Opposition deputies like Gerardo Sotelo start offering public solidarity.
Cariz gains over 850 followers in a matter of days. He becomes the ultimate, undeniable symbol of the free speech debate.
The entire country is arguing about his case.
But nobody can actually read the tweet.
He's nowhere to be found.
Neither Cariz nor the major accounts amplifying his plight, nor the politicians defending him, have ever reproduced, cited, or provided a screenshot of the actual 2025 post that triggered the summons.
We only know the thematic essence, a critique of the Cuban dictatorship.
If I am fighting a public battle for my right to free expression, and I have the entire country's attention, my first instinct would be to pin that tweet to the top of my profile and say, look at what they are prosecuting me for.
Right.
Why is the central piece of evidence completely hidden from the public square?
Because of the deeply precarious legal reality he is currently trapped in.
We have to look at the timeline.
As of these March 6th updates, his case is fully open and active before the Fiscalia. He hasn't been cleared.
If he were to take that allegedly defamatory statement and consciously republish it to an audience that has just grown by 850 people,
he would be actively generating fresh, time-stamped evidence against himself while under active investigation.
it's a legal trap.
Precisely. The state hasn't convicted him, but the mere existence of the open file dictates his behavior.
If he speaks, he aggravates the offense.
If he republishes it, he invites the PCU militants to file an entirely new set of aggravated charges.
Silence on the specific text is his only viable legal defense strategy, even as he becomes a martyr for free speech.
But his digital silence couldn't protect his physical home.
And this is where the March 2026 updates get incredibly dark.
The digital virality of his case bled out into the physical world.
Just one day before our primary source cutoff on March 5th, 2026, Cariz is forced to go to the police again.
But this time, he isn't the suspect. He's the victim.
Once the outrage over his cybercrime summons peaked in late February, he began facing direct physical harassment at his residence in Montevideo.
Unknown individuals targeted his house. They pelted his window shutters with eggs.
They systematically littered his garden and his front door with torn, crumpled flyers featuring pro-Cuba and anti-fascist messaging.
It's an intimidation tactic.
It is a group of people physically showing a 74-year-old man, we know exactly where you sleep.
And he even reported a separate incident where he was walking near a local Frente Amplio committee building close to his house.
And someone aggressively pointed him out in public, yelling, "This is the fascist who puts up the little posters."
The internet mob manifested on his front lawn.
It perfectly illustrates the dangerous feedback loop of this specific crisis. You have a state legal action that triggers intense online virality.
That digital virality acts as a beacon, which then triggers physical world retaliation.
Now, to maintain absolute accuracy regarding the current legal landscape as of March 2026, neither Perez nor Grill's detractors have been arrested.
There are no mass incarcerations over tweets. There are no financial fines levied yet.
These are all technically Comparencia's formal legal requirements to simply appear and give a statement.
But I'd argue that's missing the point.
If you receive a document requiring you to sit in a police cybercrime unit to explain a tweet, the process itself is the punishment.
The human rights advocates looking at this are screaming that this environment fundamentally violates Article 29 of the Uruguayan Constitution, which guarantees freedom of expression.
If you know that criticizing a foreign government or mocking a politician might result in police officers questioning you about your political motivations,
And then an anonymous mob egging your house,
you are going to self-censor. You are going to delete your drafts.
the chilling effect is profound. But to truly grasp why the average Uruguayan citizen feels so overwhelmingly intimidated by a simple comparencia, we have to pull the camera back.
We have to look at the machinery operating quietly in the background.
The fear isn't just about a single police interview. It's about the massive structural asymmetry of risk between the citizen and the state.
The asymmetry of risk. I want to spend a lot of time on this because the sources we have detailing the state's technical capabilities are staggering.
The Uruguayan state has spent years and millions of dollars building a highly sophisticated, deeply invasive surveillance apparatus that looks inward at its own people.
But at the exact same time, it has proven catastrophically incompetent at protecting those very same people from external digital threats.
The state demands total visibility into your life, but offers you zero defense when a foreign actor breaks down your digital door.
And the crown jewel of that inward-looking visibility is a telecommunications interception system known as El Guardian the Guardian.
Reading the documentation on El Guardian feels like reading a script for a dystopian thriller.
This isn't just a couple of guys with headphones tapping a phone line. This is a massive, centralized intelligence vacuum.
It was originally purchased in deep secrecy between 2013 and 2015 from a Brazilian firm called Digitro.
But the focus of our current updates centers on the massive upgrade it received in 2022.
The state injected another $1.1 million into the system to exponentially expand its dragnet.
Let's quantify that dragnet.
Yeah.
The sources indicate that at any given moment, El Guardian can simultaneously monitor 800 mobile phone lines, 200 landlines, and 100 specific social media or email accounts.
And we aren't just talking about listening to unencrypted cellular calls, are we?
No, that is the true paradigm shift in their surveillance capability.
Telecommunications experts who have analyzed the architecture indicate that the software has the capability to intercept interactions on end-to-end encrypted platforms.
We are talking about WhatsApp, we are talking about Telegram.
The state theoretically possesses the capability to reach into the most private, secure digital conversations a citizen can have.
And the state guarantees that it will always have something to look at, because in 2021 they passed a decree forcing every telecom operator in the country to retain all communication metadata for a mandatory minimum of 2 years.
Just in case a judge decides they want to retroactively map out your entire digital life.
Now, the state will aggressively defend this by pointing to the judicial protocols. They utilize a web-based architecture known as SAIL, the System of Administration of Legal Interceptions.
The official narrative is that a police officer cannot simply log into El Guardian and read your WhatsApp messages because they are curious.
Every single interception theoretically requires a cryptographic electronic signature from a sitting judge.
But the reality of how that system operates under pressure tells a completely different story.
The sources show that due to rising concerns over organized crime, the state adopted a security-first mentality, and the usage of El Guardian absolutely exploded.
In 2019, they executed roughly 4,800 interceptions. By 2022, that number skyrocketed to 12,439.
Let's do the math on that. In a country of roughly 3.4 million people, over 12,000 active state wiretaps is a staggering per capita surveillance rate.
Legal observers have pointed out that a volume that high creates an environment of administrative rubber stamping.
Judges are overwhelmed by the sheer number of requests.
The supposed judicial firewall becomes a mere formality, creating an environment of automatic approval.
And even if you believe the judges are diligently reviewing all 12,000 requests, The entire illusion of security completely collapsed in April 2024.
This is the password sharing scandal, and it is honestly hard to believe it actually happened.
It represents a catastrophic failure of basic operational security at the highest levels of the state.
A prosecutor named Silvia Portero detected massive, highly irregular access logs within El Guardian.
She launched an investigation and discovered that highly placed police officers, specifically within the Information and Intelligence Directorate, were completely bypassing the strict SAIL protocols.
How are they bypassing this million-dollar, cryptographically secured intelligence vault?
By borrowing passwords.
It is genuinely absurd.
You have a state system capable of cracking encrypted messaging and monitoring 800 people simultaneously, and the officers are literally just sharing their login credentials with each other like it's a family Netflix account.
They were using the unique credentials of their colleagues, and in some cases their direct superiors, to log in without authorization.
And this wasn't harmless administrative overlap.
The investigation revealed that two specific officers, Silkar Lara and Walter Amarin, utilized these shared passwords to illicitly download highly sensitive audio recordings.
Recordings related to a historic political assassination case from 1978 known as the Poisoned Wines case.
They're casually downloading historic assassination evidence using a buddy's password.
How far did this rot go? Did they isolate the breach?
The opposite. When the ex-director of intelligence, Mariana Mora, was brought in for questioning shortly after resigning, she delivered a truly chilling admission.
She stated, on the record, that she could not guarantee that the practice of sharing passwords wasn't a widespread systemic practice across her entire department.
That one sentence invalidates the integrity of the entire national surveillance apparatus.
If the Director of Intelligence cannot tell you who is logging into the system, then the system is fundamentally compromised.
But the way the state reacted when this leaked to the public is what truly terrified the freedom of expression advocates.
Because the state didn't dismantle the system. They turned it on the person who exposed them.
The journalist who broke the story about the irregular accesses was Eduardo Preve.
Instead of fixing their internal security, the state subjected Preve to an illicit police surveillance operation.
They actively compiled intelligence reports on his social media activity, they mapped out his family ties, and they executed a coordinated effort designed entirely to unmask his confidential journalistic sources.
It's the ultimate betrayal of public trust. The very tool that the government justified by saying, we need this to fight drug cartels and organized crime, was instantaneously pivoted to spy on a journalist who exposed police incompetence.
It got so bad that the Minister of the Interior, Nicholas Martinelli, had to be hauled before Parliament to explain it.
If you are a citizen watching this unfold, you see a state that is deeply uncomfortably obsessed with watching you.
But that obsession with internal control completely masks a terrifying vulnerability to the outside world.
This is the second half of the asymmetry of risk.
This is the national cyber debt.
Uruguay spent years aggressively positioning itself as the premier digital hub of the region.
They landed an $850 million hyperscale data center partnership with Google.
They digitized massive swaths of government services. They rapidly expanded their digital attack surface.
But they forgot to hire anyone to guard the perimeter.
Exactly. They invested in the infrastructure but neglected the human capital.
As of 2024, industry reports indicated the country was suffering a critical shortage of at least 600 trained cybersecurity professionals.
And when you leave the doors unlocked, people walk in. The numbers from 2024 are mind-blowing.
The country suffered over 14,000 successful security incidents in a single year.
If you break that down, that is a significant, measurable cyber attack hitting Uruguayan infrastructure every 30 minutes.
And we aren't talking about teenagers defacing a local municipal website.
We are talking about devastating state-level compromises.
The absolute clearest warning sign came in 2021 with the breach of the Ministry of Defense.
This is a scenario that should keep national security officials awake at night. A hostile actor targets the Naval Forces servers.
They don't use a highly sophisticated zero-day exploit. They use a ransomware variant known as RAM, delivered via a standard spam email.
And it works.
It worked flawlessly. The hackers managed to encrypt the servers, but more importantly, they exfiltrated the data.
A Mexican cybersecurity expert named Hiram Alejandro eventually discovered the fallout.
The hackers took 13.6 gigabytes of highly sensitive, classified Uruguayan military information and dumped it on the dark web, specifically on the Seduno Kibi or Revil extortion blog.
And they slapped a $500,000 price tag on it.
They were actively selling logistics data, the personal identification documents of naval personnel, and literal folders marked confidential, accompanied by extortion messages written in Russian.
You have foreign threat actors auctioning off your military personnel files. How does the government respond?
With a deeply entrenched culture of official denial.
Instead of acknowledging the catastrophic breach, government officials repeatedly downplayed it.
They went to the press and claimed the stolen information wasn't really sensitive and didn't represent a true risk to the state.
Which is an absurd position to take when a Russian ransomware gang is holding your naval IDs hostage.
But that systemic refusal to admit vulnerability set the stage for something infinitely worse.
Because stealing military logistics is a problem, but stealing the mathematical foundation of trust is a societal catastrophe.
Let's talk about the PKI disaster.
For the listener who might not be a cryptography expert, what exactly is a PKI, and why is it so vital to Uruguay?
PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure. In the context of Uruguay, a PKI certificate is the absolute bedrock of modern civic life.
Their legal framework dictates that a digital signature executed using a government-issued PKI certificate carries the exact same binding legal authority as a physical signature written with wet ink on paper.
It is your digital DNA.
It is how you sign a legally binding contract, how you authorize a massive financial transfer, how the government enacts laws.
It is the core mechanism of trust.
And an advanced threat actor, operating under the alias Urruguay 1337, successfully infiltrated the state's most secure digital infrastructure.
And stole the cryptographic passwords for 30,000 national ID certificates.
30,000 individual digital master keys.
By compromising those certificates, Urruguay 1337 didn't just steal data. They gained the legal ability to literally impersonate tens of thousands of citizens.
With those keys, a hacker could theoretically sign a contract in your name, empty a corporate bank account, or execute legal documents, and the state's own systems would verify the fraud as completely legitimate.
It compromised the integrity of the state's digital trust framework on a scale that cybersecurity analysts called almost beyond imagination.
So let's synthesize this reality for the citizen.
The state will utilize a $1 million surveillance system to hunt down a journalist, and they will drag a 74-year-old man into a police station over a tweet.
But they will simultaneously allow a foreign hacker to steal 30,000 digital identities because they are 600 security experts short of a functional defense.
It brings up a massive, glaring question.
How does a justice system attempt to govern cybercrime when it fundamentally does not understand the technology it is trying to regulate?
That is the core tragedy of this deep dive.
The state's inability to secure its perimeters is deeply compounded by a justice system that exhibits severe, almost aggressive technical illiteracy.
Up until they finally enacted a modernized cybercrime law in September 2024, the Uruguayan Penal Code was effectively operating on legal theories from the 1930s.
It fundamentally failed to recognize the non-corporeal nature of digital data.
And the human cost of that legal deficit is that the state began criminalizing the exact people who were trying to save it.
Let's look at the ethical hackers. These are the people who walk around the digital neighborhood, find the open back doors, and try to warn the building manager before the cartels show up.
The definitive case study here is Alberto Daniel Hill. The sources refer to it as Operation Bitcoins. Tell us what Hill discovered.
Alberto Hill is a highly skilled Uruguayan cybersecurity expert.
During his independent research, he discovered a critical, gaping vulnerability in the systems of a major national medical provider.
Specifically, he found a massive database containing sensitive patient information that was completely unauthenticated and left entirely exposed to the public internet.
Anyone with a web browser could have accessed it.
So he does what the industry textbook tells you to do.
He initiates a responsible disclosure protocol.
He contacts CERTUI, the National Computer Emergency Response Team, and says, hey, you have a massive leak of medical data here. You need to close this port immediately.
But he ran headfirst into the bureaucratic reality of the state.
CERTUI lacked the legal framework or the authority to grant him immunity for discovering the breach.
So instead of acknowledging his help and patching the vulnerability, the justice system turned the machinery against him.
Because the antiquated penal code did not have specific statutes for unauthorized access or ethical hacking, the prosecutors panicked.
They forcefully shoehorned his actions into an entirely ill-fitting criminal charge of attempted extortion.
Extortion. Did he demand a ransom? Did he encrypt the files?
No. That is where the technical illiteracy becomes terrifying. The prosecution possessed absolutely zero evidence of malicious malware.
There wasn't even a Bitcoin payment address listed in the materials they alleged were extortionate.
But during the legal proceedings, the trial exposed a profound, almost comical gap in technical understanding.
This is the part of the source material that genuinely made me stop reading. I had to read it twice. A sitting judge actually ordered Hill to be placed in preventive detention. Based on what logic?
The judge formally reasoned that because Hill possessed advanced computer knowledge, he might somehow possess the ability to mentally alter the digital evidence that was currently being stored at Interpol headquarters.
Mentally alter evidence.
They literally put a man in a cage because they thought he was a digital Jedi.
They believed he could use telepathy to beam a signal into Interpol's servers and rewrite the hard drives with his mind.
If it wasn't destroying a man's life, it would be a comedy sketch.
But the consequences were entirely real and deeply traumatic. The state's forensic negligence was absolute.
During the raid on his home, authorities confiscated his devices.
But instead of placing them in Faraday bags and securing them, they left the computers powered on and connected to external networks for a full week, completely destroying any viable chain of custody protocols.
Hard drives were tossed unsecured on the floor.
And they broke them, didn't they?
Under extreme psychological duress, which included explicit threats from Interpol agents that they would arrest members of his family if he didn't cooperate, Hill was coerced into signing a confession.
He spent 8 agonizing months in unjust imprisonment.
8 months in a cell because a judge thought he had superpowers, all because he tried to warn them about a medical leak.
And what happens to the official record when he finally gets out?
He discovers the phenomenon of the digital black hole.
His official case files, the records that would prove the state's gross incompetence, had simply vanished from the systems.
It is a documented tactic to shield state negligence from public accountability.
The sources draw a direct parallel to the erased police files of a man named Brandon Beek in California.
The state makes its mistakes disappear.
And we have to recognize that this criminalization of help is not strictly limited to Uruguay. This is a regional pathology.
It absolutely is. The sources explicitly mirror this dynamic with events in neighboring Argentina.
Focusing on a hacktivist operating under the pseudonym gov.eth, which is linked to the Ethereum blockchain.
In late 2024, gov.eth executed a series of high-profile cyber attacks against Argentine digital infrastructure, targeting the National Registry and the Buenos Aires City Police.
But his motivation wasn't purely financial, was it?
No, the authorities labeled him a standard cybercriminal, but gov.eth publicly maintained that he was exposing severe governmental negligence.
And the connection back to our deep dive is that in verifiable correspondence with Alberto Hill, gov.eth explicitly linked his ideological actions to the fate of another hacker known as Vlad.
Vlad was arrested in Uruguay in 2024 and faced years in prison under the exact same draconian data violation laws.
The systemic paradox is glaringly obvious. When the state aggressively prosecutes the individuals who expose the vulnerabilities, the state ensures that those vulnerabilities remain unpatched and ripe for exploitation by actual malicious actors.
So we've established that the domestic state is legally incompetent at protecting you, and they will throw you in prison if you attempt to fix the locks yourself.
But what happens when the threat isn't a hacker, but a multi-billion-dollar foreign technology corporation?
Where does a citizen turn when their rights are violated by Silicon Valley?
They fall directly into the sovereignty gap.
And to understand how impossibly wide this gap has become, we have to look at a precedent-setting investigation from 2017 involving a journalism outlet called Esta.
The Fabian Werner case. I want to tell this story because it perfectly illustrates the absolute powerlessness of local courts against global tech monopolies. Set the scene for us regarding this investigation.
In June 2017, an investigative journalist named Fabian Werner published a highly sensitive, deeply researched piece titled "Uruguayan Law Firm Link is Strengthened in the Plot of Spanish Corruption."
He built this investigation on revelations stemming from the Panama Papers.
It was a dense, factual unschooling of a massive money laundering and tax evasion network that directly connected Spanish political corruption to legal entities operating out of Montevideo.
It was following the money.
It examined how public funds were embezzled from Madrid's public water company, Canal de Isabel II, and it implicated major figures like Ignacio Gonzalez and Edmundo Rodriguez Sobrino.
But crucially, it named the local players in Uruguay who were facilitating it.
Yes, Werner explicitly named the Uruguayan law firm Algorta and Asociados and a company called Igmasa Management, which was operated by an Andorran lawyer named Ignasi Maestre.
The investigation meticulously laid out how these entities created complex shell companies used exclusively for money laundering and evading taxes.
It was the highest tier of public interest journalism, shedding light on how local infrastructure enabled global corruption.
The article lives online for 4 years. But then, in November 2021, the tech giant steps into the ring. Google sends a notification to Ciudadanos. What did they do?
Google informed the outlet that their investigation had been unilaterally de-indexed and removed from all search results across European territories.
Google justified this erasure by invoking the GDPR, the European General Data Protection Regulation.
They were complying with a right-to-be-forgotten request initiated by one of the Spanish citizens involved in the corruption scandal.
And shortly after that, a second related article was targeted for removal, this time utilizing the U.S. Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA.
Let's pause and chew on the philosophical implications of that.
You have a foreign corporation, Google, utilizing a European privacy law to actively erase Uruguayan journalism about international corruption.
That is a staggering overreach of corporate power.
A politician in Spain can effectively censor a newspaper in Montevideo because a tech company in California decides to comply with an EU regulation.
How did the Uruguayan judicial system respond to this?
Ciudadanos fought back. They filed an amparo action, a specific legal mechanism designed to protect constitutional rights against Google within the Uruguayan courts.
Their legal argument was brilliant and structurally sound.
They argued that Uruguay is governed by the Inter-American Human Rights Framework, which explicitly does not recognize the European concept of the right to be forgotten.
The Inter-American system views that right as a dangerous tool that inherently facilitates the censorship of public figures and historical truth.
So they essentially told the judge, you cannot let Google enforce an EU law in our country that violates our own human rights treaties.
Did the judges disagree with that philosophy?
The tragedy is that the judges never even reached the merits of the philosophical argument. They refused to engage with it.
Both the first instance civil court and the Civil Court of Appeals rejected Ciudadanos' case on a pure technicality.
They ruled that because Google LLC was not legally, physically domiciled within Uruguay, the local courts had no jurisdiction over them.
They just threw their hands up.
The appellate court reasoned that because the de-indexing technically only occurred on servers located in Europe, no verifiable, legally actionable harm had occurred strictly within the geographic borders of Uruguayan territory.
They completely ignored an amicus brief submitted by a massive regional freedom of expression network, dismissing it with a patronizing 3-word procedural stamp.
Téngase presente, bear it in mind.
That ruling sends a terrifying message to every single citizen in the country.
It essentially broadcasts, if a tech monopoly decides to erase your history, destroy your business, or silence your journalism, our national courts are powerless to help you.
It grants unaccountable, foreign-domiciled corporations unilateral, unchallenged authority over what information Uruguayan citizens are allowed to access and share.
Which brings us to the ultimate, most sophisticated update from our entire source stack.
When domestic courts admit they are paralyzed, citizens are forced to innovate.
And in February 2026, we witnessed a masterclass in jurisdictional warfare. This is the maneuver I call the tricontinental pincer.
This is genuinely my favorite part of the deep dive. It reads like a legal heist movie.
It involves an American actress, a hacked Facebook account, and an ethical hacker in Montevideo using international law to break a corporate algorithm. Walk us through exactly what happened to Nicole Eggert.
Nicole Eggert is an American actress. She had her verified Meta account, her primary Facebook presence, subjected to a highly sophisticated hostile takeover.
A threat actor operating under the email alias Gulpersacker at hotmail.com managed to bypass her multi-factor authentication, likely through a targeted SIM swap.
They seized total control of the account and immediately began committing active financial wire fraud and identity theft.
But the financial fraud wasn't even the worst part.
No. The attacker initiated a scorched earth protocol. They triggered a deletion process threatening to irreversibly destroy a decade's worth of her most sensitive personal history.
Specifically, they were targeting her cancer diaries, a deeply personal daily documentation of her stage 2 carcinoma treatments, her mastectomy, and recovery.
It was irreplaceable medical and emotional evidence.
So she does what any normal person would do. She reaches out to Meta support to stop the deletion. Hey, I'm verified I'm being hacked. Please freeze the account.
And she authorized the Uruguayan cybersecurity specialist we just discussed, Alberto Daniel Hill, to intervene on her behalf.
Meta's own internal telemetry could verify a 7-year history of direct, authenticated interaction between Eggert and Hill. They provided irrefutable proof of life and legal authorization.
But Meta Platforms Ireland Ltd., the entity responsible for processing this, completely refused to intervene manually.
Because they rely on automated legal endpoints. Their systems continually auto-rejected Hill's urgent preservation notices, kicking back automated error 550 server blocks.
Meta's algorithms were rigidly following a protocol that was effectively facilitating the permanent destruction of a woman's medical legacy.
So picture this. You have an American actress and her Uruguayan security specialist screaming at a server farm in Ireland to stop a hacker from deleting her cancer diaries, and a robot just keeps replying error 550.
The domestic courts can't help, the company won't help. How did they break out of this automated hell?
Alberto Hill recognized the systemic flaw. He knew that Meta views standard consumer complaints originating from Latin America as low-risk administrative anomalies that can be ignored by automated systems.
So, operating from his desk in Montevideo, he deployed a massive jurisdictional workaround. He invoked his dual Uruguayan-Italian citizenship.
So this is the chess move. He actively drags the European Union into the fight.
He attempted to violently shift the legal battlefield. He moved it from a polite, administrative privacy dispute into the realm of international criminal law.
Initially, it failed. The Irish Data Protection Commission, which is Meta's lead regulator in the EU, tried to dismiss the complaint.
An official named Donald Leahy argued that under GDPR Article 3.2, jurisdiction is based strictly on the physical residency of the data subject at the time of processing.
Since Eggert was in the U.S. and Hill was physically in Uruguay, Leahy claimed Hill's Italian citizenship was legally irrelevant.
But then the hacker makes a fatal, arrogant mistake.
Yes. On February 16, 2026, the hacker, feeling untouchable, initiated a hostile voice call via Messenger directly to Hill's personal device.
Why is that called a turning point?
Because that single, specific action allowed the defense to pivot their entire strategy. It was no longer a civil complaint about a data breach. It was a report of active, ongoing criminal conduct.
That phone call legally constituted cyberstalking under Article 612b of the Italian Penal Code and aggravated impersonation under Article 494.
And because the call was directed at Hill, those crimes were committed against an Italian citizen.
So by initiating that call across Meta's infrastructure, the hacker committed a felony against an EU citizen on European regulated servers.
Exactly. Hill immediately filed an urgent criminal complaint with the Polizia Postale, the Italian State Police cybercrime unit.
Simultaneously, he invoked the urgent injunctive relief powers of the Italian Garante, which is their highly aggressive data protection authority.
And he legally cornered the Irish DPC. He shifted his GDPR argument from Article 3.2 to Article 3.1, successfully arguing that Meta Ireland, because it is an establishment within the Union, is absolutely bound by EU law for all its processing activities, regardless of where the victim is physically sitting.
He trapped them in a regulatory web of their own making. And what did the Italians do?
On February 18, 2026, the Italian Garante formally asserted jurisdiction. They issued protocol number 002458.
This document was the ultimate leverage. It served as binding, undeniable legal proof of a state-level investigation into cyberstalking and the potential spoliation of vital medical evidence.
A compliance collision.
Precisely. Meta Platforms Ireland could comfortably ignore an automated email from Uruguay, but they absolutely could not ignore a formal criminal subpoena from the Italian State Police regarding an active felony facilitated on their servers against an EU citizen.
If Meta failed to execute a global session kill to stop the act of stalking, they would transition from a passive platform to an entity liable for aiding and abetting a crime,
while simultaneously facing fines from the Italian Garante that could reach up to 4% of their entire global revenue.
Faced with the threat of international criminal liability and massive EU fines, Meta's Special Operations team finally bypassed their automated systems.
They manually intervened and executed a silent fix to secure the account and save Eggert's medical legacy.
It is a stunning, brilliant tactical victory.
It is. But as we celebrate the ingenuity of that maneuver, we have to recognize what a profound indictment it is of the global system.
A citizen should not be required to orchestrate a tricontinental legal pincer movement, leveraging obscure clauses of Italian penal codes and European data laws, just to get a multi-billion-dollar tech company to stop a crime from happening on its platform.
Which brings us to the structural solution. Uruguay recognizes that the current dynamic is unsustainable.
You cannot rely on every citizen being a dual national cybersecurity expert. How is the state attempting to structurally respond to this crisis?
By trying to pass a landmark, comprehensive regulatory framework, the bases para una regulación democrática de las grandes plataformas digitales en Uruguay.
Officially presented to Parliament in October 2025.
The bases proposal. Let's really dig into the legislative horizon here, because this is how a country attempts to claw back its sovereignty. What is this proposal actually trying to achieve?
This proposal was drafted collaboratively by prominent digital rights organizations, specifically Observacom and DataSoc, and it carries the backing of UNESCO.
It seeks to directly address the profound, paralyzing power asymmetry between global tech conglomerates and the sovereign nation-state.
And it's important to note how it diverges from previous efforts. It deliberately avoids direct economic or labor regulations, like the July 2025 Law 20.396 that established protections for gig workers on apps.
Instead, the bases focus exclusively on the democratic governance of the digital square, the protection of human rights, and forcing structural accountability onto the platforms themselves.
Our source documents outline 7 core pillars of this framework. Let's break those down, because they are essentially a blueprint for how to tame a tech monopoly. What is the first pillar?
The first pillar is the establishment of democratic limits on how platforms moderate content. It aims to shift the power of deciding what speech is acceptable from opaque corporate boardrooms in California back to democratically accountable institutions.
The second pillar is algorithmic transparency.
Which is huge. They are demanding that platforms open the black box and reveal the internal algorithms that dictate content visibility, specifically targeting the insidious practice of shadow banning,
where a user's content is suppressed without their knowledge.
The third pillar is a guarantee of due process. It mandates that if a platform removes your content or bans your account, they must provide a transparent, human-reviewed appeal mechanism.
You cannot just be subjected to an automated Error 550 block with no recourse.
And the fourth pillar seems directly aimed at fixing the nightmare of the pseudo-stata precedent.
Yes, national jurisdictional access. This is perhaps the most legally contentious pillar.
It explicitly ensures that Uruguayan users have the right to seek redress against tech companies within national courts.
It demands that companies like Google or Meta submit to local jurisdiction if they want to operate in the country, ensuring citizens aren't forced to navigate foreign legal systems just to protect their rights.
What are the final 3 pillars?
The fifth is asymmetric regulation. This means that monopolistic, highly dominant entities bear a significantly higher burden of compliance and transparency than smaller domestic startups.
The sixth is the creation of independent regulatory institutions to actually conduct the algorithmic audits and enforce compliance.
And the final pillar is promoting regional harmonization across all of Latin America, creating a unified legal bloc to prevent tech giants from exploiting fragmented country-by-country laws.
It is an incredibly ambitious framework, but as with every single topic in this deep dive, the proposal is facing intense, deeply polarized opposition.
There is a fierce linguistic and philosophical battle over what this law actually represents to the public.
It is a rhetorical inversion of censorship. Conservative political factions aligned with heavy lobbying from the tech industry deploy the term censorship to delegitimize the entire regulatory effort.
They argue that any state intervention, any attempt to regulate how platforms operate, equates to state control over free speech. They paint it as the government trying to dictate the timeline.
But the human rights advocates pushing the bases argue the exact opposite reality.
They do. The advocates maintain that the bases are, in fact, the ultimate anti-censorship tool. They rely strictly on the UNESCO standard, which dictates regulating the processes of the platforms, never the content itself.
The state is not trying to dictate what political opinions can be said. Instead, the state is trying to prevent unaccountable foreign domiciled corporations from acting as arbitrary private censors over the Uruguayan public sphere.
So if we pull all of this together, what does this actually mean for the listener?
We started this deep dive looking at an invisible, unreleased tweet from 2025 that somehow triggered real-world eggs being thrown at a 74-year-old retired professor's house in March 2026.
We explored the terrifying weaponization of a $1.1 million surveillance system called El Guardian and the absurd, tragic imprisonment of an ethical hacker who's treated like a telepathic criminal.
And we saw how a brilliant, desperate tricontinental pincer maneuver had to utilize Italian penal codes to fight off Meta's automated algorithms.
Uruguay is currently serving as a perfect, highly pressurized microcosm for the frictions of the modern digital age.
It vividly demonstrates exactly what happens when legacy legal frameworks and antiquated 20th century penal codes attempt to govern a hyper-accelerated, borderless digital reality.
We are watching a state that is dangerously vulnerable to external threats, as evidenced by the catastrophic PKI breach, yet becoming increasingly uncomfortably intrusive domestically.
The ultimate trajectory of their digital democracy, and by extension, ours, depends entirely on their ability to pass comprehensive platform regulations that mandate corporate transparency without enabling state-sponsored censorship.
And their willingness to subject their own surveillance tools to intense, unyielding democratic oversight.
And for you, listening to this right now, this matters directly to your life. The boundaries of your digital existence, what you are allowed to say on a timeline, who is actively watching you say it, and who is profiting from the data you generate are being actively rewritten in real time.
Whether you are living in Montevideo or Milan or Miami, the legal battles being fought in these March 2026 documents are coming to a server and potentially a police precinct near you.
It raises a profound, overarching question about the fundamental nature of our future digital rights.
Exactly. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If our digital identities, our most intimate medical records, and the very public squares where we debate our politics are governed by a chaotic, overlapping patchwork of foreign privacy laws, automated corporate algorithms that can't be reasoned with, and severely outdated local penal codes, who actually owns your right to speak and exist online. Thank you for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive. Keep questioning the digital world around you. We'll see you next time.
Bienvenidos a El Debate, nuestro espacio para el análisis riguroso y la confrontación de ideas sobre las cuestiones más complejas de nuestro tiempo. Hoy nos centramos en una cuestión que, está marcando verdaderamente la agenda pública. Hablamos de la profunda crisis de derechos digitales y libertad de expresión que atraviesa Uruguay en este primer trimestre de 2026.
Una crisis que, desde luego, no ha dejado indiferente a nadie.
Exacto. Bajo la reciente administración del presidente Yamandú Orsi, del Frente Amplio, hemos visto una ola de citaciones judiciales a ciudadanos por sus publicaciones en la red social X, y esto ha fracturado por completo la opinión pública. Así que la pregunta central que estructura nuestro análisis hoy es la siguiente. ¿Representan estas acciones de la Fiscalía una deriva autoritaria que busca silenciar la disidencia política o son, por el contrario, un mecanismo legítimo y necesario del Estado de Derecho para exigir responsabilidad legal ante la difamación sistemática y el acoso organizado?
Es una dicotomía fascinante. Y muy, muy peligrosa, si me permites el apunte.
Desde luego, y precisamente por eso este debate surge del examen exhaustivo de documentos legales, reportes de libertad de prensa, recientes debates parlamentarios y, por supuesto, los testimonios directos de los involucrados allí en Uruguay. Para establecer los parámetros de nuestra discusión desde el inicio, yo defenderé que estas citaciones y las nuevas normativas representan un esfuerzo legítimo para democratizar las plataformas y frenar la difamación.
Mientras que yo argumentaré que estas acciones evidencian una peligrosa deriva autoritaria y un uso excesivo del aparato estatal para intimidar la crítica política. Es un placer estar aquí para desgranar un tema de tal gravedad.
El placer es mío. Bien, si te parece, comencemos sentando las bases de nuestras posturas. Desde mi perspectiva, el punto de partida es que la libertad de expresión, incluso en su concepción más amplia y garantista, jamás ha equivalido a impunidad para el acoso o la injuria. Un Estado de Derecho tiene la obligación ineludible de proteger el debate público de la degradación absoluta.
A ver, nadie defiende el acoso, pero cuando hablamos de libertad de expresión frente a la intervención del Estado, debemos comprender el grave efecto escalofriante que sufren los ciudadanos cuando el aparato estatal utiliza sus recursos policiales contra la opinión política.
Ya, pero es que no hablamos de simple opinión política. Tomemos el caso del periodista de izquierda Leandro Grill. No estamos hablando de críticas a sus editoriales o a su postura sobre el Frente Amplio. Grill fue víctima de una campaña de acoso coordinada y profundamente personal, donde múltiples cuentas utilizaron referencias vulgares al dictador Goyo Álvarez para atacar directamente a su familia, específicamente a su madre. Las citaciones emitidas por la Fiscalía del Sexto Turno no constituyen censura previa, son sencillamente la aplicación estricta de la ley vigente ante denuncias de particulares.
Lo siento, pero simplemente no me lo creo. Déjame decirte por qué considero que esa distinción entre acoso y debate político se está utilizando de forma espuria. Tú mencionas a las cuentas anónimas que atacaron a Grillo, y es cierto que el lenguaje empleado es deleznable, pero al amparo de perseguir ese acoso, la red judicial está atrapando a ciudadanos que no tienen absolutamente nada que ver con campañas coordinadas de difamación.
¿A qué ciudadanos te refieres exactamente? porque la Fiscalía actúa en base a denuncias formales, no sale a cazar tuiteros por aburrimiento.
Pues fíjate en el caso del profesor Antonio Romero Píriz. Hablamos de un hombre de 74 años, un jubilado del Instituto de Profesores Artigas. ¿Sabes por qué fue citado? No fue por un juzgado civil en un pleito entre particulares, no, sino por la sección de cibercrimen de la policía.
Tengo entendido que fue a raíz de una denuncia por sus publicaciones, sí.
¿Sí? ¿Pero qué publicaciones? Un tuit, un simple mensaje publicado en 2025 donde criticaba abiertamente a la dictadura cubana. Bastó una denuncia de militantes del Partido Comunista del Uruguay para que toda la maquinaria estatal se pusiera en marcha contra él. Someter a un ciudadano de 74 años a un proceso judicial con interrogatorios policiales sobre sus motivaciones ideológicas por expresar una opinión geopolítica es francamente alarmante.
Ese es un punto interesante, aunque yo lo enfocaría de otra manera. Las audiencias preliminares, que es a lo que se enfrentó este profesor, no son condenas. Son sencillamente el mecanismo que tiene el sistema para dirimir si hay caso o no.
Esta exposición pública derivó en agresiones físicas contra su domicilio. Le lanzaron huevos, le rasgaron panfletos en la puerta de su casa. Esto evidencia que el sistema penal está siendo instrumentalizado para silenciar voces opositoras. Hay una asimetría de poder inaceptable entre el Estado y el individuo. La herramienta legal, tipificada como difamación o injuria, se está usando con fines puramente ideológicos.
Entiendo la preocupación por la asimetría, pero la noción de que Uruguay está, digamos, importando tácticas represivas para castigar la disidencia ignora la continuidad institucional del país. Es fundamental recordar que este tipo de citaciones por difamación en redes sociales no son un invento de la administración de Yamandú Orsi. Se emitieron frecuentemente bajo la administración anterior de Luis Lacalle Pou. La ley es exactamente la misma.
Que la ley sea la misma no significa que su aplicación actual no tenga un sesgo evidente. Vemos a manifestantes pro democracia cubana siendo citados a declarar el mismo mes en que el Senado uruguayo, impulsado por el Frente Amplio, pasa resoluciones apoyando a La Habana. La narrativa del acoso se desmorona ahí.
No estoy de acuerdo en que se desmorone. Lo que ha cambiado en estos últimos años es la amplificación de la histeria en las plataformas y el nivel de virulencia. Cuentas anónimas como Felipe Bill 26158 o incluso cuentas con más tracción como Facho y Pico, que se dedican a la crítica política del sindicato PIT-CNT, cruzan reiteradamente la fina línea hacia el discurso de odio y la difamación seriada. Y aquí llegamos al meollo del asunto. ¿Qué hace un ciudadano cuando es difamado en una plataforma que no responde a nadie?
Acudir a la justicia, supongo. Pero una cosa es dirimir un conflicto civil y otra movilizar a la división de cibercrimen.
Claro, pero las audiencias preliminares terminan siendo el único mecanismo real porque las grandes corporaciones tecnológicas se niegan a moderar el contenido a nivel local. Y esto nos lleva a un punto crucial que me gustaría poner sobre la mesa, la soberanía digital. El Estado debe recuperar la jurisdicción nacional sobre el espacio digital, porque corporaciones como X o Google nos han dejado completamente indefensos.
A ver, explícame eso de la soberanía digital, porque suena a excusa perfecta para controlar Internet.
No es control, es acceso a la justicia. Recordemos el gravísimo precedente del caso Sudestada. En 2017, el periodista Fabián Werner publicó una investigación vital sobre lavado de dinero. Implicaba a una empresa de aguas de Madrid, el canal de Isabel II y a varios bufetes de abogados en Montevideo. Fue periodismo de investigación del más alto nivel.
Sí, recuerdo el caso. Una red de corrupción transnacional muy compleja.
Exactamente. Pues bien, 4 años después, Google borró unilateralmente ese periodismo de investigación de sus resultados de búsqueda. ¿Y sabes qué argumento usaron? Invocaron las leyes europeas de protección de datos, el famoso derecho al olvido.
Aplicando legislación europea en territorio uruguayo.
Efectivamente, y ahí es donde Sudestada tuvo que recurrir a una acción de amparo ante la justicia uruguaya.
Para quienes nos escuchan y no estén familiarizados con el término, una acción de amparo es un recurso legal de urgencia destinado a proteger derechos fundamentales de forma rápida, como en este caso, el derecho a la información.
Tal cual. Pero, ¿qué ocurrió? La justicia uruguaya se declaró incompetente. Argumentaron que no tenían jurisdicción porque Google no tiene domicilio legal en Uruguay. Es una capitulación absoluta de la jurisdicción nacional. Una corporación de Silicon Valley decidió qué periodismo podían leer los uruguayos basándose en leyes de otro continente, y el Estado uruguayo no pudo hacer absolutamente nada. Por eso, iniciativas actuales como las bases para una regulación democrática, respaldadas por UNESCO y Observacom, buscan precisamente garantizar el acceso jurisdiccional nacional. No queremos censurar, queremos que los ciudadanos no dependan de los caprichos de un algoritmo.
Ese es un argumento convincente, pero ¿has considerado la inmensa hipocresía que supone otorgarle ese nivel de control jurisdiccional a un Estado que abusa sistemáticamente de su propio poder de vigilancia?
Hipocresía. El Estado tiene el deber de proteger a sus ciudadanos de los abusos corporativos.
Sí, argumentas que el Estado debe protegernos de las corporaciones extranjeras, pero ¿quién nos protege del Estado uruguayo? Detengámonos un momento a analizar la infraestructura de vigilancia masiva del Ministerio del Interior, el famoso sistema El Guardián.
Es una herramienta de intercepción legal para combatir el crimen organizado, no un sistema de vigilancia masiva al estilo de las agencias de inteligencia de superpotencias.
Sobre el papel, claro, pero hablemos de la práctica. Este sistema costó millones de dólares y centraliza la interceptación de telecomunicaciones. Puede monitorear simultáneamente cientos de líneas móviles, correos electrónicos e incluso el tráfico de WhatsApp. La teoría dicta que requiere una autorización judicial muy estricta, pero la realidad es que el volumen de interceptaciones se ha triplicado en pocos años. Se ha generado un entorno de aprobación casi automática por parte de jueces que están absolutamente sobrecargados.
Que los jueces estén sobrecargados es un problema sistémico de recursos, no una prueba de espionaje malicioso.
Espera, que hay más. En abril de 2024, una investigación liderada por la fiscal Silvia Porteiro destapó un escándalo monumental. Resulta que altos mandos policiales, incluyendo directivos de la Dirección de Inteligencia, compartían contraseñas y accesos al sistema El Guardián de manera generalizada.
Aquello fue una brecha de protocolo inaceptable, es cierto.
Fue mucho más que una brecha de protocolo. Oficiales de alto rango descargaban audios altamente sensibles de casos históricos, como el caso de los vinos envenenados, de forma totalmente irregular, como si fuera un catálogo a la carta. Y la cereza del pastel, cuando el periodista Eduardo Preve expuso todas estas fallas de seguridad y el descontrol interno, ¿cuál fue la respuesta del aparato estatal?
Hubo una investigación interna.
Lo sometieron a él a una operación de vigilancia policial ilícita. Investigaron a su familia, rastrearon sus redes para descubrir quiénes eran sus fuentes. Un Estado que espía a la prensa investigativa cuando destapa sus vergüenzas y que ni siquiera puede controlar a sus propios agentes de inteligencia, no tiene ninguna legitimidad moral, ni mucho menos institucional, para erigirse como el árbitro de la verdad o el regulador del debate en las redes sociales.
Entiendo por qué piensas eso, pero permíteme darte una perspectiva diferente sobre el papel del Estado. Ojo, no te voy a negar que el escándalo de las contraseñas en El Guardián y el seguimiento ilícito al periodista Eduardo Preve son gravísimos. Son fallos institucionales que requieren una depuración interna implacable. Te lo concedo sin reservas. Existe en Uruguay una enorme deuda cibernética nacional.
Una deuda que pagan los ciudadanos con su privacidad.
Pero la ineptitud técnica o administrativa de ciertos sectores del Ministerio del Interior no invalida la obligación constitucional del Estado de mediar en los conflictos de derechos entre ciudadanos. El Estado no pierde su legitimidad para investigar una denuncia por difamación solo por el hecho de tener vulnerabilidades informáticas. Precisamente para atajar estos problemas, el Parlamento promulgó recientemente la Ley 20.327 sobre ciberdelitos.
Una ley que llega tarde y mal.
Llega para modernizar un código penal que estaba efectivamente anclado en el siglo pasado. El Estado intenta adaptarse. El problema radica en que, mientras esperamos que la infraestructura estatal alcance los estándares internacionales de ciberseguridad, no podemos cruzarnos de brazos y permitir que el espacio público digital se convierta en la ley del más fuerte. No podemos abandonar la regulación ciudadana y dejar a la gente a merced del acoso solo porque el Estado aún esté perfeccionando sus propios sistemas de control interno.
El problema no es que el Estado esté perfeccionando sus sistemas. El problema es el analfabetismo judicial crónico que castiga a los ciudadanos éticos mientras premia, por inacción, a los verdaderos criminales.
Llamarlo analfabetismo judicial me pareció una exageración retórica.
¿Te parece una exageración? Hablemos de las prioridades de la Fiscalía en materia de ciberseguridad. Mientras la unidad de cibercrimen dedica sus limitados recursos a citar a un profesor de 74 años por un tuit sobre Cuba, ignoran amenazas críticas. Fíjate en el infame caso del hacker ético uruguayo Alberto Daniel Gil, la conocida Operación Bitcoins.
Aquel caso fue sumamente polémico, lo admito.
Fue un desastre absoluto. Gil descubrió vulnerabilidades críticas en un proveedor médico nacional. Hablamos de una base de datos con información sensible de pacientes expuesta a Internet público. Él hizo lo correcto. Siguiendo todos los protocolos éticos, reportó el fallo al equipo de respuesta a emergencias informáticas del Estado, el CERTUI.
Y la respuesta de la policía no fue la adecuada. Hubo un malentendido enorme sobre sus intenciones.
Un malentendido. Fue arrestado en su casa y procesado por intento de extorsión, basándose en evidencia técnica insostenible. Fue sometido a prisión preventiva. Y aquí viene lo del analfabetismo judicial. El nivel de ignorancia técnica fue tal que un juez justificó mantenerlo en prisión argumentando que, por sus altos conocimientos informáticos, Gil podría alterar mentalmente la evidencia que estaba almacenada en los ordenadores de la sede de Interpol.
Bueno, esa declaración específica del juez fue un error de formulación lamentable.
Dijo que podía alterar un disco duro con la mente. Y durante el allanamiento, la policía dejó sus discos duros tirados por el suelo de su casa y sus dispositivos conectados a Internet durante una semana, violando por completo cualquier cadena de custodia básica. Gil pasó 8 meses encarcelado injustamente. Y fíjate en el contraste. Mientras el Estado persigue a tuiteros jubilados y encarcela a hackers éticos que intentan ayudar a asegurar la infraestructura de salud, el país sufre un ataque cibernético serio cada 30 minutos.
La ciberseguridad es un reto global, no solo de Uruguay.
Pero la incompetencia local tiene consecuencias reales. Toda esta falta de preparación culminó en el cataclísmico robo de 30.000 certificados de identidad digital, la infraestructura de clave pública o PKI, por parte de un actor malicioso conocido como Origegu 1337.
Un hackeo muy sofisticado.
¿Sofisticado o no? Esos certificados son la llave maestra digital de los ciudadanos. Tienen un valor legal idéntico a una firma manuscrita. Quien los tenga puede firmar contratos, autorizar transferencias, suplantar identidades al más alto nivel. La Fiscalía se obsesiona con el ruido político en las redes porque es incapaz de comprender y mucho menos detener el verdadero crimen digital que está desangrando la soberanía del país.
Los errores garrafales cometidos en el caso de Alberto Gil evidencian sin duda una alarmante falta de capacitación técnica en algunos sectores del ámbito judicial. Eso no te lo discuto en absoluto, y es algo que el nuevo marco legal de la Ley 20.327 intenta subsanar paulatinamente mediante la especialización de magistrados.
Va a hacer falta mucha especialización para revertir ese daño.
Sin embargo, la existencia de crímenes informáticos de altísima complejidad, como el devastador ataque a la infraestructura PKI que mencionas, no exime a las autoridades de atender las denuncias del día a día presentadas por los ciudadanos.
Pero demuestra que las prioridades están completamente invertidas.
Discrepo. Si un individuo acude a la Fiscalía argumentando que su honor y el de su familia están siendo vulnerados sistemáticamente en Internet, el fiscal tiene el deber ineludible de investigar. Desestimar estas denuncias ciudadanas bajo el pretexto de que existen delitos mayores, como el robo de certificados digitales, equivaldría a decir que la policía no debe investigar un robo con violencia a una vivienda particular porque existen cárteles de narcotráfico internacional operando en las fronteras del país.
No es la misma escala, y lo sabes. En un robo con violencia hay daño físico inmediato. En X hay palabras.
Las palabras tienen consecuencias reales en la vida de las personas, su reputación y su salud mental. El Estado debe desarrollar la capacidad de hacer ambas cosas simultáneamente, perseguir a cibercriminales como Origugu 1337 y proteger a los ciudadanos de la difamación. Además, hay algo que se suele malinterpretar sobre iniciativas como las bases para una regulación democrática.
Ilumíname.
No tratan sobre endurecer el código penal contra los usuarios. Tratan de obligar a las plataformas, a las grandes tecnológicas, a rendir cuentas. Buscan que expliquen cómo sus algoritmos de recomendación fomentan y amplifican deliberadamente este discurso denigrante simplemente para maximizar el tiempo que pasamos frente a la pantalla. Al obligar a las corporaciones a transparentar prácticas como el shadow banning, esta reducción oculta de la visibilidad de ciertos usuarios, y exigirles procesos de apelación ágiles y locales, el Estado no busca silenciar a nadie. Busca equilibrar el poder,
equilibrar el poder dándole más poder al aparato de censura.
La verdadera censura en la actualidad no proviene de una citación policial aislada a un usuario de X. Proviene de los algoritmos opacos de empresas tecnológicas que deciden de manera unilateral y sin auditoría qué noticias leemos, qué periodismo sobrevive y qué voces son invisibilizadas en el debate público sin ninguna garantía de debido proceso.
Discrepo profundamente con esa equivalencia. La censura corporativa es un problema grave, lo admito. El caso de Sudestada borrado por Google por unas normativas europeas que no aplican aquí es indignante.
Es una vulneración flagrante de la soberanía.
¿Lo es? Sin embargo, la censura corporativa, por muy opaca que sea, no tiene el poder de privarte de tu libertad física. Un algoritmo no va a allanar tu domicilio de madrugada, ni te va a someter a un proceso penal que arruine tu vida o te meta 8 meses en prisión preventiva como Alberto Gil. El monopolio de la violencia legítima sigue estando, exclusiva y afortunadamente, en manos del Estado.
Por eso mismo, el Estado debe intervenir para proteger a los más vulnerables en el ecosistema digital.
Pero cuando ese mismo Estado, que ha demostrado ser técnicamente inepto e institucionalmente proclive al espionaje político interno con herramientas como el Guardián, asume el rol de árbitro absoluto del discurso bajo el pretexto de combatir la difamación, el riesgo para la democracia es exponencialmente mayor.
Insistes en ver mala fe donde hay aplicación de la ley.
Es que la judicialización de las opiniones políticas no es un simple daño colateral en la búsqueda de un debate público más limpio. Es una táctica sistemática de intimidación. Cuando Romero Piris es obligado a comparecer ante la sección de cibercrimen de la policía por un tuit, el mensaje que se envía al resto de la sociedad es cristalino. La disidencia ideológica frente a los postulados del gobierno conlleva un altísimo costo legal y psicológico.
Yo creo que la sociedad entiende la diferencia entre crítica política y difamación.
La hipervigilancia estatal y la penalización de la crítica son curas muchísimo más peligrosas que la enfermedad del ruido, el acoso o la polarización en las redes sociales. Estamos creando un ecosistema tóxico donde los ciudadanos éticos viven bajo la amenaza constante de represalias legales, mientras la infraestructura crítica del país permanece dolorosamente expuesta a los verdaderos delincuentes.
Creo que, llegados a este punto, hemos delineado con mucha claridad los contornos de este problema. Debemos resumir nuestras posturas a la luz del complejo panorama que hemos trazado a lo largo de esta charla. Desde mi perspectiva, la democracia moderna requiere ineludiblemente límites claros frente a la difamación sistemática y la hegemonía indiscutible de las corporaciones tecnológicas extranjeras.
Algo que, en mi opinión, están enfocando de la peor manera posible.
Las citaciones emitidas por la Fiscalía responden a un marco legal que busca proteger el honor de los individuos ante ataques coordinados, y al mismo tiempo, Uruguay necesita urgentemente implementar normativas asimétricas para exigir transparencia algorítmica y asegurar el acceso jurisdiccional nacional, evitando así que nuestro derecho a la información sea secuestrado por legislaciones extranjeras como vimos en el caso de Google.
Por mi parte, me mantengo firme en que la evidencia apunta a una realidad mucho más sombría. La judicialización del discurso político, evidenciada en citaciones absurdas por meras críticas a gobiernos extranjeros, genera un efecto escalofriante incompatible con una democracia plena.
A pesar de nuestras evidentes diferencias, creo que ambos podemos acordar explícitamente en un punto fundamental sobre la estructura legal.
A ver si adivino, que nuestro marco legal penal está trágicamente estancado en el pasado.
Exactamente. Es a todas luces inadecuado para manejar la tremenda complejidad de la era digital y la velocidad a la que mutan estas plataformas.
Totalmente de acuerdo. Ese desfase legislativo y sobre todo técnico está generando fallos sistémicos masivos. Por un lado, el Estado fracasa estrepitosamente en la protección de la infraestructura de datos críticos de la nación frente a hackers reales, y por el otro se muestra absolutamente torpe e invasivo a la hora de garantizar los derechos fundamentales y la privacidad de los ciudadanos de a pie.
Es evidente que analizar esta constante fricción entre la libertad de expresión ciudadana y la indispensable necesidad de mantener la soberanía del Estado en la era digital es de un inmenso valor intelectual. Casos como la censura impuesta por corporaciones tecnológicas, el espionaje gubernamental injustificado y la profunda polarización política que fragmenta hoy a la opinión pública en Uruguay ofrecen muchísimo material para seguir explorando. Son ventanas que nos permiten entender las fragilidades y los enormes retos a los que se enfrentan todas las democracias modernas.
Sin duda, hay mucha más profundidad en este material de la que podemos abarcar hoy. especialmente en cómo las jurisdicciones transnacionales chocarán cada vez más con las realidades y legislaciones locales. Tenemos debate para rato.
Dejamos entonces a nuestros oyentes la tarea de reflexionar sobre los argumentos expuestos hoy. Queda en sus manos sacar sus propias conclusiones sobre dónde se encuentra exactamente ese delicado límite entre la regulación y vigilancia necesaria para sostener el Estado de Derecho y el alarmismo judicial que amenazan nuestras libertades fundamentales. Gracias por acompañarnos en esta edición de El Debate.
Febrero del 26, un tuit te puede costar una cita en fiscalía, a ciberdelitos vas a declarar. Dicen que es difamación, que hay que frenar el odio hoy. Otros gritan alarmados, hacia una Cuba 2.0 voy. Oh, la soberanía digital en la cuerda floja está. El guardián nos vigila, en la sombra escuchará. En la justicia actuando un giro autoritario letal. Bienvenidos a la crisis de nuestra libertad de cristal. El profesor Romero Piris, por un tuit sobre Fidel, termina denunciado, tiran huevos contra su cartel. Abre Facho y Pico y Goyo Álvarez, la policía va a buscar. Mientras en las redes todos temen que van a publicar. Dicen que es la misma ley que usó la calle Púa ayer. Hipocresía partidaria, nadie quiere retroceder. Oh, la soberanía digital en la cuerda floja está. El guardián nos vigila, en la sombra escuchará. En la justicia actuando un giro autoritario letal. Bienvenidos a la crisis de nuestra libertad de cristal. Y en medio del caos la deuda cibernética es real. Hacker ético sufriendo como Alberto Gil en el penal. Pero con la pinza tricontinental a la gigante Meta doblegó. Usando su pasaporte italiano todo el sistema hackeó. Google borra su destada sin piedad ni compasión. ¿Quién nos defiende en esta tierra de la corporación? Las bases democráticas llegan por fin al Parlamento. ¿Traerán la luz al algoritmo o serán otro lamento? Dicen que regular el proceso no es imponer censura, pero en el ciberespacio la verdad siempre es oscura. Protege el diálogo, mantén viva tu voz. Uruguay está parado en una encrucijada feroz. Ni monopolios gigantes, ni el Estado opresor, buscando libertad en un servidor.
Digitales. Y lo más irónico de todo es que a la vez están debatiendo una ley pionera para impedir que gigantes como Google censuren información en el país. Es de locos. En definitiva, Uruguay está atrapado en un laberinto donde la delgada línea entre frenar el odio y silenciar a la oposición es cada vez más borrosa.